The HY-2 Silkworm coastal defense missile is a weapon that entered service in the People's Liberation Army in 1959, was transferred to North Korea in the early 1970s, and has been in Korean People's Army Artillery Command inventory for over 50 years. This channel will take a moment to note what 50 years means in missile technology, because the context matters before the story begins. The AIM-54 Phoenix that appeared in a previous episode was a weapon from 1974. The Kibini ECM pod from the Black Sea encounter was designed in the 1980s. The Silkworm is from 1959. The year 1959 is the year the first commercial jetliner entered regular transatlantic service. It is the year that a computer of the era occupied a room the size of a suburban house. It is the year that the solid-state transistor radio was a new technology, and that the phrase guidance, computer, referred to an analog device of considerable physical mass and very limited capability. The guidance computer in the Silkworm is, in the specific sense that matters operationally, a product of that era's engineering. The Silkworm's terminal guidance is an active radar seeker that the international arms control community characterizes as having a circular error probable of approximately 300 meters against a stationary target. A destroyer underway at 20 knots covers 300 meters in less than 30 seconds. The Silkworm was designed to be terrifying to ship traffic in the 1960s. In the 1960s, it was. This channel will not mock the Silkworm. It will, however, note that when the Silkworm's targeting radar illuminated USS Chung-Hoon on a Wednesday morning in the Yellow Sea, the event generated two simultaneous responses: a genuine and documented tactical concern aboard USS Chung-Hoon, and the most unambiguously complete characterization of the oldest active targeting radar in any threat library that the Fifth Fleet's EW intelligence staff had ever received from a live operational platform. The tactical concern lasted approximately 14 minutes. The characterization will be in the library for years. The Yellow Sea exercise that USS Chung-Hoon was participating in, a bilateral US-ROK naval exercise focused on combined surface warfare and undersea operations, had been running for 3 days when the Wednesday morning watch began. The watch team at 9 o'clock had been there long enough to have developed the working familiarity with the exercise's operational pattern that 3 days produces: the ROK Navy partner destroyer's position habits, the expected contact density in the northern box, the specific way that Yellow Sea autumn weather manages the surface picture with periodic rain squalls that raise the background radar clutter and then clear it. The coffee in the CIC was the exercise's coffee, better than the previous deployment standard, because someone in the supply chain had made a decision that the exercise operational tempo warranted slightly better sourcing, a decision that the watch team had noted and approved of without formally acknowledging. The exercise scenario placed USS Chung-Hoon in the northern exercise box, a defined operating area approximately 60 miles west of the Korean Peninsula coastline and approximately 90 nautical miles south of the northern limit line. The NLL is the de facto maritime boundary that runs along the northern edge of the Yellow Sea between South Korean waters and North Korean waters, and its vicinity is the specific geography where the Korean People's Navy has historically been most operationally active. The exercise's ASW coordinator had tracked 3 North Korean patrol boat contacts since 700 hours, all at standard distances from the NLL, present, logged, within the expected behavioral profile of DPRK forces monitoring the bilateral exercise. Expected. Normal. The exercise was proceeding. At 9:22, the SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite produced an alert whose tone the defensive systems operator recognized immediately, and whose classification she delivered to the tactical action officer with the specific combination of technical precision and human incredulity that the situation warranted. TAO, ESM, fire control radar emission, bearing 048, range estimate 58 miles, classification, a pause of approximately 1.3 seconds. Myronader. Acquisition mode. Sir, it's active. It's painting us. The tactical action officer looked at the classification. He looked at the bearing, 048, which placed the emitter on the North Korean coast approximately 58 miles northeast. He looked at the mode, acquisition mode, not search mode. He looked at the range estimate. He noted that 58 nautical miles was inside the Silkworm's maximum stated range of approximately 93 kilometers, 45 nautical miles in the older version. The extended range, HY-2 variant, pushing to approximately 65 nautical miles. The stated range. The range on a clear day with a well-maintained battery operating a guidance seeker that was designed in 1959. He noted all of this. He notified the commanding officer at 9:22:48. The commanding officer arrived in CIC at 9:23:30. He reviewed the picture with the standard focused compression of a senior officer processing a tactical situation. Fire control radar, HY-2 classification, bearing northeast, range approximately 58 miles acquisition mode. He also reviewed a number that his tactical action officer had already calculated and placed prominently in the log. The HY-2's operational accuracy at 58 nautical miles against a maneuvering target in current sea state conditions, given the known degradation of the guidance system's performance at extended range, was approximately 600 to 1,200 meters from USS Chung-Hoon's current position, depending on which intelligence community range accuracy model was applied. 600 to 1,200 meters. In nautical miles, that is between 0.3 and 0.7 miles. At 20 knots, USS Chung-Hoon would clear the 600-meter radius of the worst-case impact prediction in approximately 54 seconds of sustained maneuver. This arithmetic was noted. The commanding officer ordered a course change to increase range from the emitter at 092415. The course change is the vulnerability, and it deserves direct description. The commanding officer's course change was correct. It was the appropriate tactical response to a fire control illumination from a shore-based anti-ship missile battery. It was also, in the specific context of the bilateral exercise, a course change that took USS Chung-Hoon out of its assigned exercise position, required immediate coordination with the ROK Navy elements, whose exercise geometry assumed USS Chung-Hoon would remain in the northern box, and generated the specific administrative consequence of a coordinated exercise having its scenario interrupted by an actual threat event. The exercise ASW coordinator noted the development with the measured acceptance of someone who has learned, over years of naval service, that exercises in the vicinity of the northern limit line periodically encounter exactly this category of interruption. He began the exercise pause and notification sequence at 9:24:20. The bilateral exercise was suspended at 9:24:45, suspended for 14 minutes. This is the vulnerability window. 14 minutes during which USS Chung-Hoon was maneuvering out of the northern exercise box. The ROK Navy elements were repositioning, and the HY-2's targeting radar was active on the original exercise position bearing. Not on USS Chung-Hoon's new position, the ship was moving, and the HY-2's acquisition radar was not successfully tracking it at extended range under the maneuver conditions. The SLQ-32 noted at 092611 that the HY-2's acquisition mode emission pattern had shifted in a way consistent with the radar searching for a contact it had lost track of. It was still illuminating. It was illuminating the area where USS Chung-Hoon had been. It had not successfully reacquired the maneuvering destroyer. This was noted and logged with the precision of someone who understands the difference between illuminated and tracked. The distinction matters. At 9:35:47, the Silkworm's targeting radar transitioned from acquisition mode back to search mode. At 9:36:01, it went off air entirely. 14 minutes of active acquisition illumination. No launch. The HY-2 battery had activated its targeting radar, illuminated the exercise area, failed to maintain track on the maneuvering destroyer, and shut down. The exercise resumed at 9:38:30. Now comes the intelligence section. And this is where the story becomes something that the North Korean battery crew does not know about and will not know about, and which this channel will describe with the detail it deserves. The SLQ-32 had been in collection mode since the initial acquisition alert at 0922. 14 minutes of HY-2 targeting radar operation at a range of 58 nautical miles provided the collection architecture with a dataset that, in terms of library completeness, had one specific quality that no other recent collection event had matched. The HY-2's fire control radar is the oldest active targeting radar in any U.S. Navy threat library. Not old as in last updated a few years ago. Old as in the original library entry was created from documentation obtained during Cold War intelligence sharing programs and has not been significantly updated from operational collection since the 1980s. The HY-2's radar guidance system, in its active acquisition mode, produces emission characteristics that are theoretically well understood, but which have not been observed from a live operational platform in the current collection cycle's time frame. The existing library entry was accurate in its fundamental characteristics. It had not been validated against a live operational emission in over 30 years. Tuesday's 14 minutes validated it. Specifically, the acquisition mode emission pattern that the SLQ-32 captured matched the library entry on 5 fundamental characteristics: frequency, pulse width, pulse repetition frequency, scan rate, and power output level. Matched, not approximately matched. The HY-2's guidance radar is stable in these parameters in a way that modern adaptive systems are not, because it was designed to stable parameters before adaptive electronics were an available engineering option. It performs consistently. The consistency is a design constraint. The consistency is also why the original library entry, created from documentation, rather than operational collection, has remained accurate for decades. The system does not change because the technology does not permit change. The validation of the library entry against live operational data is, in the intelligence community's vocabulary, a confirmation of baseline accuracy. Not a dramatic new finding, but a foundational quality assurance event that establishes confidence in the library entry for all future applications. What was new? The mode transition signature. At 9:26:11, when the HY-2's acquisition mode shifted to a contact search pattern consistent with having lost track of USS Chung-Hoon, the emission produced a specific transition signature, a brief frequency gift, and scan rate change that occurred during the transition from locked track acquisition to lost contact search. This transition signature had not been in the library entry because the library entry had not included an operational scenario where the system lost track of a maneuvering target. The 1980s era documentation had characterized the system in nominal operation. Tuesday's collection characterized the system in a failure mode. The failure mode emission, the specific electronic signature that the HY-2 produces when its guidance radar loses a maneuvering target, is the collection finding that the 5th Fleet EW intelligence staff flagged as the highest priority product of the event. Understanding how a weapon system behaves when it has lost your ship is operationally useful in a very specific way. If you can detect the transition signature in real time, you know the system has lost track of you. You know that maneuvering further is no longer necessary. You know you can stop burning fuel at emergency maneuver speed. USS Chung-Hoon's commanding officer had ordered the course change based on prudent caution. If future commanding officers in the same situation have the updated library entry and the specific transition signature characterized, they have a real-time indicator of whether the threat has lost track. A capability that the 1980s documentation had not provided. The collection team's description of this finding in the initial assessment was tactically actionable addition to library entry. This is a phrase that, in the restrained vocabulary of intelligence assessments, means something that a ship's CIC crew can use in real time during an actual engagement scenario. Tactically actionable is the highest quality designation the library team applies to new collection findings. It was appropriate here. The SLQ-32's collection also captured the HY-2's power output variation across the 14-minute acquisition period. The power output declined slightly, approximately 7%, between the initial activation and the shutdown. This is consistent with either a battery management issue in the power supply. The guidance radar's power draw over extended acquisition periods can exceed the battery's sustained output in aging systems. or an active power management decision. The 7% decline over 14 minutes is a data point that the library entry did not previously include. It tells the operational community something about the HY-2's sustained operation characteristics, specifically that extended acquisition operations draw down the power supply at a measurable rate, which has implications for the maximum effective engagement duration that the battery can sustain before power supply degradation begins to affect seeker performance. The number is now in the library. The battery commander on that North Korean hilltop did not know he had donated it. The money picture on this encounter is, proportionally, the most asymmetric in the collection across all 30 scripts. The KPN-HY, 2 coastal defense batteries operational cost for a Wednesday morning activation. Battery crew on station, radar activation, and 14 minutes of operation. Shutdown and stand down runs to approximately $3,000 to $8,000 in equivalent operational cost. Call it $5,000. The HY-2 missiles themselves, loaded on their launchers, represent sunk costs that amortize across all the activations of the battery, rather than individual operational events. The day's direct operational expenditure was approximately $5,000. No missiles were launched. No fuel was consumed beyond what the radar's power supply consumed. The KPN battery crew activated a targeting radar, lost track of the target, and shut down. Total investment, approximately $5,000. USS Chung-Hoon's additional operational cost, the emergency maneuver fuel expenditure, $4,000. The exercise suspension overhead, $8,000 in additional coordination and administrative cost. And the EW intelligence processing for the collection package, $85,000 over 48 hours. Total additional U.S. cost, approximately $97,000. The intelligence package value, HY-2 library entry validation against live operational emission, failure, mode, transition signature characterization, power output, decline profile, and the tactical applicability of the transition signature for real-time track loss detection. Assessed by the 5th Fleet, EW, intelligence staff, at approximately $2.7 million in collection cost equivalents. This assessment reflects the specific scarcity value of live HY-2 operational collection data and the 30-plus year gap between the previous live collection event and Tuesday's observation. The $2.7 million is not primarily what the data is worth in the abstract. It is what it would have cost to produce equivalent characterization through any other available collection means. And the answer to that question is essentially, you cannot produce this from any other means, because no other collection scenario places this specific system in active acquisition mode at useful range with a suitable collection asset present. The battery crew had produced, in $5,000 of operational cost, the only live HY-2 failure mode characterization in the current generation of the threat library. The characterization went into the library. The library update went to every surface combatant in the 7th Fleet within 72 hours. The Korean Central News Agency's treatment of the week's events, as with all Korean People's Army coastal defense operations, was non-existent. The KCNA does not publish information about specific tactical activations of coastal defense systems, because specific tactical information about coastal defense systems is not the kind of information that the KCNA exists to disseminate. The KCNA's military coverage addresses strategic messaging, the kind that references the Korean People's Army's capability to defend the sovereign territory of the Democratic People's Republic against any aggressor with overwhelming force. The kind that describes exercise programs as demonstrations of readiness and resolve. The kind that does not include sentences like, the HY-2 battery at grid coordinate X activated its targeting radar for 14 minutes and lost track of the American destroyer at the 9-minute mark. That sentence is in the U.S. Navy's log. It is not in the KCNA's editorial priorities. The ROK Navy Coordination Officer, who managed the exercise suspension and resumption, filed his section of the post-event report with the dry practicality of someone who has managed this type of interruption before and who has, over time, developed an appreciation for the specific training value that unscripted DPRK coastal activity provides to bilateral exercises that the exercise plan cannot replicate with scripted scenarios. A scripted threat produces a trained response. An unscripted threat produces an actual response, which reveals different things about the bilateral coordination architecture than the trained response does. His section noted the DPRK coastal activity, the exercise suspension timeline, the resumption at 9:38:30, and the fact that the exercise's planned scenario for the rest of the day was completed without further interruption. He noted the total exercise delay, 14 minutes. He noted in the final paragraph of his section that the bilateral exercise's combined response to the DPRK activation had demonstrated the coordination capability between US and ROK naval forces in exactly the kind of real-world interruption scenario that exercise planners script into exercises, but which is more instructive when it occurs organically. The exercise had been interrupted. The interruption had been managed. The exercise had resumed. The post-event reports intelligence annex, prepared separately and distributed on a different circuit, addressed what the SLQ-32 had collected during the 14 minutes. The ROK Coordination Officers section and the Intelligence Annex described the same 14 minutes from different professional orientations, and both orientations arrived at the same conclusion. The bilateral exercise had functioned correctly under real-world pressure. The HY-2 battery crew had contributed to this conclusion without meaning to. USS Chung-Hoon resumed its assigned exercise position at 0941. The commanding officer noted the return to position in the watch log, noted the exercise resumption time, and noted that the tactical maneuver during the HY-2 activation had been executed in accordance with applicable guidance. The watch log entry for the 14-minute window was, by any measure, the most interesting entry in 3 days of bilateral exercise documentation, and it was complete, precise, and exactly what the people who would read it needed it to be. He also noted, in the intelligence section of the day's report, that the SLQ-32 collection data had been prioritized for immediate transmission to the 5th Fleet EW intelligence cell. The cell received it at 10:47. The duty analyst who opened the package looked at the classification. HY-2 active acquisition mode, failure mode transition, 14 minutes. And spent a moment with the knowledge that no one in the current collection program had received HY-2 failure mode data from a live operational platform in the current era. Then he flagged it for immediate senior review and called the section Chief. The section chief read the failure mode transition signature section first. She described it to the duty analyst in the specific vocabulary of experienced analysts receiving genuinely useful data as the one we've been waiting for. The library entry was updated that afternoon. Bye for now.